Hold up.
Good morning, everybody. Today we're talking about disease prevention God's way. Disease prevention God's way. Because God has given us a grand opportunity to either eat healthful or eat in a way that it will cause us problems. We see here life and death. The question is, which one do we choose? Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 15 and 19 says, "See, I have set before thee this day life and good, and death and evil. I call the earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and cursing. Therefore, choose life, and both you and thy seed may live." So if God is telling us to choose life, he's giving us the way out. But it's up to us to take it. If we choose life, that means we're going to teach our children God's way so that our seed may live. But if we choose death, then we teach our children the opposite of what is right in God's eyes, and death comes upon them as well. Before we go into that, look at this picture here. It's about the brain. It's telling us the threats to protect us and some extra power. First, let's talk about threats to the brain. Saturated fats, trans fat, excess iron, excess copper, aluminum. When we eat the excess, all the saturated fats, Swiss cheese is loaded with saturated fat, ice cream is loaded with saturated fats. We're just talking about some of it, and loaded with saturated fats. When we eat this, it causes a problem in clogging up the brain. Trans fats, you know, those sweet donuts people likes and all those nice sweets. You go to the store, them little Debbie snack cakes and Hostess and Ho-Hos and Twinkies. Yes, those things aren't good for you. Excess iron. It's okay to cook in an iron skillet, but you can't cook in the iron skillet constantly, because constantly doing that is putting more iron in your system than it needs. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting some good cornbread out of a skillet. I'm just gonna be honest with you. There's nothing wrong every now and then with having you a nice cobbler in the skillet. There's nothing wrong with that. Excess copper. All the copper in the house, when water runs through it, guess what puts inside of your food? Copper. It puts copper inside of your food, and it doesn't help you a bit. So we need to find a way to get all of that out of the system. And that copper, as we see, is come down to another thing called aluminum. The doctor would tell you not to cook in aluminum pots, because when you cook in it, it adds it to your food. Now let's look at the good parts. The vitamin E comes from nuts. Now, if you look at a walnut and open it up, you'll realize that it looks exactly like your brain. So it's good brain food. Beans and chickpeas and all those legumes, they're good for the brain. They're healthy and they're full of protein. Blueberries and grapes and blackberries and all of these good things God made for us to eat, that's good for the brain. Green leafy vegetables, some of my favorite, I'm telling you, those things are superb. Sweet potatoes, yes, sweet potatoes are good for your brains and they are good for your stomach. vitamin B12. If we eat the right foods, the B12 goes in and it helps our brain to open up so that we can learn, so that we can have a superior knowledge. Now, this extra power called exercise, something that a lot of God's children refuse to do. Let's just tell the truth. People do not want to exercise. We need exercise. We need to read because reading stimulates the brain. Okay? And the proper amount of sleep, Talia, I need you to mute. And the proper amount of sleep, because the proper amount of sleep helps us so that we can get a restful night and wake up refreshed and our brains is ready to go. Now, water, let me tell you the most important thing about water, even though it's not up there. We need water first thing in the morning when we wake up. That's the first thing that should go in our mouths for at least 30 minutes to an hour, because it stimulates all the body organs. It stimulates all the bodily organs and get them to moving in the right direction. Okay? Before you stick food in your mouth, you need to drink water. All right? The last thing needs to go in our body before we go to bed at night is water, because an 8-ounce glass of water will help prevent a heart attack during the night while you are sleeping. Now, let's look at this, what it says. When it decided to do, right? Yes. Y'all excuse me, this thing is wanting to do this. There we go. I need whoever that is to mute. True temperance teaches us to dispense entirely with everything hurtful and to use judiciously that which is helpful. There are few who realize, as they should, how much their habits of diet have to do with their health, their character, their usefulness in this world, and their eternal destiny. It has a lot to do with all of this. So we see that come from Patriarchs and Prophets, page 562. We need to understand that our diet, the temperance, our diet teaches us to dispense entirely with everything hurtful. And a lot of times we do things hurtful because of what we're eating, and it makes us miserable. And we need to understand this. Our diet has a lot to play with how we live, how we act, and in all. So think about this for a minute. Hygiene and cleanliness, the rule in Israel for anyone that was suspected or known to be infectious was this. Leviticus 13, verses 45 and 46 says, and the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent and his head bare, and he shall put a covering upon his upper lip and shall cry, unclean, unclean, all the days wherein the plague shall be in him. He shall be defiled, he is unclean, he shall dwell alone, without the camp shall his habitation be. So in other words, God said that if a person was unclean, they had to go outside the camp. They couldn't stay in with everybody else. They had to go outside the camp away from everyone, so that the rest of the people would not get infected. Think about that. If it was like that in Israel, it needs to be like that today. But you can also see Numbers chapter 5, verse 2 through 4. Miriam got leprosy, not only in the people of Israel's religious service, but in all the affairs of daily life was observed the distinction between clean and unclean. All who came in contact with contagious or contaminating diseases were isolated from the encampment, and they were not permitted to return without thorough cleansing of the body and the person and the clothing. We find that in Ministry of Healing, page 277. You think about it. Would it make sense to have someone stay in the house or stay and come around everybody that's not infected, infect them with sickness? Why do you think when someone in the house is sick, you set them in a room off to themselves until you get them better so that they are better? That's the way God wants it to be. Okay? Here's an Old Testament example of cleanliness. A straddle trench. A straddle trench is something that I learned about in the military. What a straddle trench does is it keeps infection in a camp down. What you do is you dig a trench, like I say, it's so deep and 12 inches wide. And every time somebody come and release themselves in it, they throw dirt over it. Once it was filled, you had to cover the dirt, pack it, and mark it so that it would not be food with in that area again. Well, God showed the Israelites to do the same thing. In Deuteronomy chapter 23 and verse 12, it says, "Thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go forth abroad, and thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon. And it shall be, when thou wilt ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back and cover that which cometh from thee." In the Marine Corps, we call that a cat hole. You dig a hole, you ease yourself in it, and you cover it back up. It's funny, at least they learn something from the Bible. So there's something we need to understand. Cleanliness is next to godliness. And how can you be godly if you are not clean? Good question to think about that. Here is a urinal trough. In every respect, the Israelites were to preserve cleanliness. They were to allow nothing untidy or unwholesome in their surroundings, nothing which would taint the purity of the atmosphere. Inwardly and outwardly, they were to be pure. That comes from SDA Bible Commentary, volume 1, page, it's probably 119. I'm sorry. So we understand God is trying to show us that we need to be clean. And that's what the Bible is telling us. Cleanliness is next to godliness. So man's original diet given and eaten by God. Let's talk about diet. We see all these beautiful fruits and nuts down there. You got peanuts and oranges and cherries and grapes, and you got all kind of good fruit, apples and peaches, and you got root herbs down there, ginger. All of this is made so that we can have a beautiful diet. Genesis 1:29 says this, "And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, it is to you, it shall be for me." So, in other words, that's our food. Every herb in the field that bears seed, greens bear seed. Let them grow long enough, you see the flower pull up on the long stem, and it drops seeds out. So we can eat that. Grapes that have seeds, we can eat that. Watermelons that have seeds, we can eat that. Why? Because the Bible said it should bear a seed within itself. So we know all the foods that we can eat, but man decided to change his own diet. This added after the fall of man. Genesis 3:18, in the last part, God told man something after the fall that would help him to that would actually shorten his lifespan, but this sad man didn't understand what God was saying to him. It says this right here in Genesis 3:18. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. Because of sin, God brought about thorns and thistles to make man's job harder to get his food. Blackberries are some of the greatest berries. I'm talking about, they taste so good, but you got to get past those thorns. Dewberries taste so good, but you got to get past those thorns. And that's all there is to it. Just like with a raspberry, you got to get past those thorns. And thou shalt eat the herb of the field. So we got to still eat the herb of the field. God said, you eat the herb of the field. It is still what God had in our original diet, even though there was some trouble getting to it. Now, we know for a fact that man thinks that he can do what he wants. But let's look at this. Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. These foods, prepared in a simple and natural as manner as possible, are the most helpful and nourishing. They impart a strength, a power of endurance, and a vigor of intellect that are not afforded by a more complex and stimulating diet. God gave our first parents the food he designed that the race should eat. It was contrary to his plan to have the life of any creature taken. There was to be no death in Eden. The fruit of the trees in the garden was the food man's wants required. And that's found in Counsels on Diet and Food, page 81. So I don't know how many people love nuts, but when you go to eating nuts, some of them have to be roasted, some of them you just crack right out of the shell and start eating. But they are so good. They provide you your omega oils that you need to stimulate your brain. They provide you a lot of nourishment in as natural state as possible. Even our vegetables in a natural state as possible are great for us to have in our system. Okay? But major changes of diet that shortened the human lifespan. Man was hard-headed, so God had to do something for him to shorten that lifespan. Genesis chapter 9, verses 3 and verse 29 says, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. And all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Okay, Genesis 11, 24 and 25 says, and Nahor lived 920 years and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 190 years and begat sons and daughters. 119 years and begat sons and daughters. I'm sorry. If we notice, man was living a long time. Now, Nahor came, I believe, maybe after the flood, and Noah was before it. But if we look at it, it's Nahor did come after the flood, and Noah was before it. And if you look at it, there's a difference in the age of how long they lived. Noah was eating fruits, nuts, grains, and herbs of the field. Nahor had meats in his diet. You notice what the meats did to the diet? It changed the lifespan. Now, we can see some of the meats here on the table that they have. Close to the corner, you see a dog. On up in there, you see a chicken, you see rats, you see cats, you see horse heads, you see everything. Man don't care if it moves, if it walks, if it crawls, if he can put chocolate on it, if he can roast it, if he can boil it, or if he can fry it, or barbecue it, he's going to eat. Because man doesn't listen to God. And that's why his life is so short. And that's why sicknesses or in the world as they are today. You see man in the middle and you see his food chain around. Everything around that man, he will eat. I know this because I've watched videos of him eating all of this stuff. And that's pitiful. That is not God's plan. That is not God's diet. After the flood, the people ate large enough animal food. God saw that the ways of man was corrupt and that he was disposed to exalt himself proudly against his creator and follow the inclinations of his own heart. And he permitted that long-lived race to eat animal food to shorten their sinful lives. Soon after the flood, the race began to rapidly decrease in size and in length of years. And this was found in Counsels on Diets and Food, page 373. Now you know why we are as short as we are today. Because our size decreased because of sin, and our years decreased because of sin, and because of the foods that we ate. Changes God made in man's diet to protect him from diseases was simple and good. And in Leviticus 3:17, it shall be a perpetual statute. I highlighted that because it means a forever living statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings, that ye eat neither fat nor blood. Now, let's talk about the fat and the blood. The fat was to be burned as a sweet smelling savor to God on the altar. That's what God wanted, the fat in the entrails of the animal. The blood was to be used to sprinkle on the horns of the altar for the forgiveness of sin. But man done got to where he will fry blood in his eggs and anything else. He eats everything he can. And talk about how much fat that goes into your system to keep you healthy. No, it doesn't. All kinds of diseases is dissolved in the fat in the blood. The life of the animal is in the blood. God said we are not supposed to eat the blood because of the life. Another reason we want to eat the blood, because the blood shed showed the blood that Christ would shed for us. That's why the blood was not supposed to be eaten. But as we said, as man said, he can eat what he wants. But nuts and nut foods are coming largely into use to take the place of flesh meats. With nuts may be combined grains, fruits, and some roots to make food that are helpful and nourishing. Care should be taken, however, not to use too large a portion of nuts when properly prepared. Olives, like nuts, supply the place of butter and flesh meats. Now, that comes from Ministry of Healing, page 298. And the reason I know this to be true is because if you eat a lot of nuts, you're going to overload your system with oils and fats. That's what it's telling us here. If you eat a lot of olives, you're going to overload your system with oils and fats. Okay. If you eat too many avocados, you're going to overload your system with oils and fats. So you don't want to overload your system with those. You want to eat it in the moderation, the way God said for us to eat it.
I don't know how that happened.
Bible teachings concerning fermented wines and strong drinks. Okay. Proverbs, hold on a second, so I can get this. I already got it marked so I can read. It says this in Proverbs 23, verses 29 and 32. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath battling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder. So what does wine do for one who continues to drink it as if he cannot stop? He or she is compelled to make it a fool of themselves in causing pain and embarrassment upon the rest of their family. When the Bible said that the wine giveth its color in the cup, that means it stains the cup on the inside. When it said it moveth aright, let me tell you something about wine that maybe a lot of folks don't know. When you pour wine in a cup and you notice bubbles are rising up from the bottom of it, making the wine continue to move after it has settled, that's because of fermentation. Fermentation in wine brings about an alcohol so that when you drink it, it will screw up your mind so badly. You got these few types of drunk. You got the happy drunk, you got the fighting drunk, you got the I love you drunk, and you got the crying drunk. Those four drunks I know for a fact are out there.
You got the giving drunk.
Oh yes, and you got the giving drunk. He wants to give you every dime in his pocket, give away everything he has, and then later he wants to know if somebody stole it from him. But the thing is, when a person is drinking wine and they go to getting a little inebriated, they go to acting a fool, and they don't understand why. And then they want to drive down the road with a missile and kill folks. Do what the Bible said and leave it alone. That's the greatest thing about it all. God prohibited the use of wine to the priest ministering in his sanctuary, and the same injunction would have been made against tobacco had its use been known, for it too has a benumbing influence on the brain, and besides clouding the mind, it is unclean and defiling. Let everyone resist the temptation to use wine, tobacco, flesh meats, tea, or coffee. Fundamentals of Christian Education, page 428. Now, I'm going to tell you about the tea and the coffee. When people go to drinking this stuff just because they want to drink it, that's a problem. Coffee has caffeine in it. A lot of teas have caffeine in it. Caffeine works on the headache, but if you drink it all the time just because you like drinking it, it will give you a headache. Something a lot of people need to understand.
Make you go to bed.
Let's talk about this tobacco and this wine. When you drink wine, it blocks the frontal lobe. Tobacco blocks the frontal lobe, so it blocks frontal association. And that's why people that do this have a problem. Now, God said he's going to place his seal in the forehead. That's right there on the frontal lobe. How can God place his seal on the frontal lobe when you have all these poisons right there in it? He cannot. The effect of tea and coffee, as heretofore shown, tends in the same direction as that of wine and cider, liquor, and tobacco. This is Council on Diets and Foods, page 421. Now, let me tell y'all about the cider. The cider is talking about is that apple cider that has been fermented. It isn't talking about plain old apple cider that you get and you heat it up so you can drink it on a cold day. This is talking about fermented cider. We're not supposed to drink nothing that is fermented because it makes an alcohol in the system and does the same thing as a glass of wine or a bottle or a can of beer or a shot of liquor. It's the same thing. Jesus provides grape juice and not alcohol. How do we know this? I will show you in the book of John, chapter 2, verse 7 through 10, and it says this. Jesus said unto them, fill the water pots with water. You notice he started with what? Water. Okay? And they filled them up to the brim. And he said unto them, draw out now and bear unto the governor of the feast. And they bare it. When the ruler of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine and knew not whence it was, But the servants which drew the water knew. The governor of the feast called the bridegroom and said unto him, every man at the beginning doth set forth good wine. And when men have well drunk, then that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine unto now. So what is wine? Wine is actually juice from a grape, or juice from a cherry, or juice from an apple, or juice from a berry, but it is not fermented. Let me explain something to you quickly about juice. If you let it sit out long enough in a dark place by itself, it's going to make its own alcohol. If you sit it in the sun, it's going to quickly make its own alcohol. So therefore, that's why the Bible says you put new wine in new wine skins, because it was talking about putting the new fresh squeezing of the juice in the new wine skins. So when a person was drinking that which was worse, it meant that it had fermented. The old wine in the wine skins had fermented. So they wanted to get rid of that. So after they gave people a good juice and they had drank that and they started getting to that which was worse, it transitioned slowly. So by the time they got to the worst, they wouldn't know they were drinking something that was fermented because they were already being inebriated. But in the end, they drank pure grape juice. And they was like, man, now this is some good stuff. You waited till the last to give that which was good. Anything Jesus makes is good. Amen. Look closely at verse 10 and see, and saith unto him, every man at the beginning does set forth good wine. And when men have well drunk, then that which is worse, but thou hast kept the good wine until now. In other words, you kept the fresh squeezing from the vine until now. Good wine is fresh squeezings from the press. Worse is that which has fermented. So when you go out there to talk about buying grape juice in the store, you're buying grape juice. Let it sit too much longer and you're drinking wine. That's all there is to it. Okay? Now, as we go forward, we will see there's that grape juice right here in the communion glass. It was Christ in the Old Testament gave the warning to Israel. Wine is a mocker. Strong drink is raisin. And whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 1. And we know what a person is not wise is called. They call them a fool. So I guess this Proverbs chapter 20 verse 1 is talking about the drunken fool. And he himself provided no such beverage. Satan tempts men to indulgence that will becloud reason and benumb the spiritual perceptions. It was Christ who directed that John the Baptist should drink neither wine or strong drink. It was he who enjoined similar abstinence upon the wife of Manoah, and he pronounced a curse upon the man who should put the bottle to his neighbor's lips. Christ did not contradict his own teachings. The unfermented wine, which he provided for the wedding guests, was a wholesome, refreshing drink. Its effect was to bring the taste into harmony with the healthful appetite. So that's from the Desire of Ages, page 149. So we see Christ would not do anything to contradict the teachings that he gave in the Old Testament to the prophets. So why would he turn around and make fermented wine to give the people? It would make no sense. So anybody that's saying, well, Christ made wine, they got it all wrong. Healthful food consumption amount that's taught in the Bible. You know, everybody likes to go all day long and just gorge themselves until now they can hardly walk around. They're so tired of sleeping. The Bible tells us how much we should eat on a daily basis. Exodus 16:6 says this. This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, and omer for every man, according to the number of your persons. Take ye every man for them which is in his tents. Now, a person asks, what is an omer? I'm glad you did. An omer is 2.08 quarts per day. So if you're eating more than 2.8 quarts of food per day, you're overeating. That's all there is to it. That means all that junk food you're throwing in there with it, that counts. So you're overeating, and we shouldn't be eating junk food anyway. Okay? It is possible to eat immoderately, even of wholesome food. It does not follow that because one has started the use of hurtful articles of diet, he can eat just as much as he pleases. No, that's not what it's saying. It's saying because you eat healthy food don't mean you can eat as much as you please. Overeating, no matter what the quality of the food, clogs the living machine and thus hinders in its work. Intemperance in eating, even of healthful food, will have an injurious effect upon the system and will blunt the mental and moral faculties. Counsels on Diets and Food, page 131. And that is so true. I'm going to tell you from personal experience, I know this. Because one time, for some reason, I was hungry and I was eating. And although I was eating apples and bananas and pears and fruits, I was just overeating and overeating. And believe me, when I went to bed, I could barely sleep. I woke up with headaches. I woke up distressed that morning. My system hadn't done its job, and I was in trouble. What I'm trying to tell you is this. If you are constantly eating, you don't give your digestive system the chance to do the job that it needs to do. In between meals, we should eat nothing. That's right, nothing. Why? Because when you eat in the morning, if you eat at 6 o'clock, between 6 and 12, we should be eating, because anything ate between that time stopped the digestion process of the first foods we ate, and it stores that food around the belly as fat. Then it has to start working on the fat and what we just ate. And you turn around and you eat at 12 o'clock, now it stops working on that food and stores it around the belly as fat. And it has to start digesting what you just ate. Around 3 o'clock, people say, I need a snack. Okay, now it stopped working on digestion of 12 o'clock and it's trying to digest 3 o'clock. So when at 6 o'clock you eat that big meal that folk like to eat before at the end of the day, and wonder why they feel so sluggish when they wake up in the morning. That's why, because right before bed, I need a snack. No, you don't. Let your body rest. Let your body do what it needs to do. Stop overtaxing your digestive system. Because believe me, you don't have that much digestive system in your juices in your body. That lipase needs to do its job. That's all there is to that. Okay? Now, biblical teaches on gluttony. Deuteronomy and chapter 21 and verse 20. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. You've seen these eating contests, right? On television where these folks are set there to see who can eat the most hot dogs in 2 minutes. That's gluttony. That's all there is to it. Putting down 60 hot dogs in 2 minutes is pure gluttony. Your body cannot digest that. It's overtaxing. So eating all this food like you ain't got nothing better to do, all you're doing is putting your system to work and causing your system to tell you, I need some help. The peristalsis waves inside your system that's going on inside of your stomach to help digest your food by moving it back and forth across the villi is not going to work because you don't stop it from moving. So now only thing is happening is absorption of that is quick. And now fat sets in around the belly, on the legs, in the face, and everywhere else. As a people, with all our profession of health reform, we eat too much. Indulgence of appetite is the greatest cause of physical and mental debility, and lies at the foundation of a large share of the feebleness, which is apparent everywhere. Counsels on diets and food, page 135. Yes, I know somebody's saying, why did he put that up there? It's not the lady that's important, it's what's on the table. She is eating a whole turkey by herself. That is not good. That's where our problem comes in at. Your body can't digest that, and it packs it on the body as fat. Y'all gonna say, why do you keep saying this? I'm trying to get all of us to see a common form of intemperance among God's professed people, among the professed people of God. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 16 and 17. Woe to the land, woe to thee, O land, when thy king is a child and thy princes eat in the morning. Blessed art thou, O land, when thy king is the son of nobles, and thy prince eat in due season, and not for drunkenness. This is what it's talking about. All of these snack foods that people like to eat, all them Cheetos and wheat thins, whether it's a wheat thin, it's got to be good. No, it isn't. It's processed. Anytime food is processed that deeply, it is no good. Yes, I know I still have a problem with some of it. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I'll be open with you. And I'm fighting it. Believe me, it's a fight to the finish. All of us are fighting with something. Sugar is nothing but a poor man's crack. And that stuff is made to get you hooked and don't want to let you go. The world's view of health is 5 healthy snack recipes to eat between meals. Really? I am astonished to learn that after all the light that has been given in this place, many of you eat between meals. You should never let a morsel pass your lips between your regular meals. Testimonies, volume 2, page 373. Nothing should be eaten between meals. No confectionery, you don't really need to eat that anyway. Nuts, fruits, or food of any kind. Irregularities in eating destroy the healthful tone of the digestive organs to the detriment of health and cheerfulness. Ministry of Healing, page 384. You ever see the person walk around always miserable, but they always eat? And they wonder why they're miserable. They say, well, I eat to drown my sorrows. No, you eat because you're sorrowful. That's making you sorrowful. Stop eating. Stop eating. Throw away that rock and roll ice cream, them ho-hos, them donuts, and everything else you want to eat between meals. Let that stuff alone, and you feel sad, go walking. Get some fresh air, some exercise in. By the time you get back to the house, you ain't gonna be thinking about eating. You're gonna be thinking about the last part of what you see. Rest, something that your body needs anyway. That's what we need to understand. We can't keep doing to our organs what we've been doing. Our esophagus, liver, stomach, gallbladder, pancreas, large intestine, small intestines, appendix, rectum, and anus are going through turmoil because we are not giving them the rest that they need. The liver only supplies so much lactate. The gallbladder only supplies so much. The pancreas supplies so much. You only have so much digestive juice inside of your small intestines, and the large intestine coming all the way down to your rectum. Before you get started, you got to ask yourself a question. How do this stuff digest? One, you got to have enough water in your system. Without drinking enough water, digestion is going to be hard. Two, you have to eat the right foods. Eating a lot of meats inside of your system takes away the water from your system, so digestion is going to be hard. A lot of carbohydrates in your system takes the water away, so digestion is going to be hard. We have to realize when we eat the way God tells us to, our system works in perfect order. Okay? The digestive organs, like a meal which is continually kept running, becomes enfeebled. Vital force is called from the brain to aid the stomach in its overwork, and thus the mental powers are weakened, the unnatural stimulation and wear of the vital forces make them nervous, impatient, resistance, self-willed, and irritable. Counsels on diets and food, page 181. So we see, here is the problem that we have. Now, we will have prayer before we go into our discussion now. Father in heaven, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for helping us to understand that we can prevent diseases if we just eat according to how you tell us, if we just obey the 8 laws of God that you have given to us. Father, I know I couldn't put everything into this short PowerPoint, but we're asking that you be with us and that you bless us. Help us to understand that we need to live according to your will and your way. Be with us, and we pray and we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Come on. Oh, wait a minute, y'all.